We got to have some people who will stand up for principles. The whole swamp is the fact that you got this central government in DC that extracts $7 trillion out of the real economy every year and hands it off to their political cronies.
So recently, Dave Smith was on the Tom Woods Show talking about the man he considers the only true hero in Washington, D.C. and in the U.S. government, and what he's done to try to curtail the excesses of the state in terms of foreign policy, spending, and other types of issues. Let's get Dave's take, and please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Clearly, Israel has a lot of influence over the U.S. policy in the Middle East and a lot of influence over domestic policy in the United States of America. But I really do think that Donald Trump is just that petty, that the issue for him is just that you were against him. And, I'm sure that, Donald Trump's got a lot of hawks in his ear, and I'm sure all of them are just trash and Massey to him. But it is, I guess, and then aside from that, I just say, I don't know. This is all speculation, but we know what he's doing, and it's truly reprehensible. I mean, like Thomas Massey, everybody involved knows that if Joe Biden had proposed the same spending bill, Thomas Massey would be voting the same way. Or if a different Republican had won and had the same spending bill, he'd be voting against it too. We all know he's casting his vote over principle.
But yes, Donald Trump, Dave, in a way, that's what they're criticizing him for. It's so weird. You shouldn't vote on principle. You should vote because the tribe tells you to vote.
Yeah, and Donald Trump, look, he made the Doge thing a huge part of his campaign. And he was talking about it at every single stump speech through the second half of 2024. Maybe a little after that, but certainly by the fall, that was coming up in every single stump speech. And they made a huge thing out of this, creating this fake government department and talking about cutting trillions of dollars and all the waste. And then you have a spending bill that doesn't, that basically destroys the whole thing. Elon Musk leaves in this time. You know what I mean? Like the whole Doge work has all been for nothing, essentially.
Yeah, I have to agree here. Massey stands on principle, and he does so regardless of the party in power and the party in opposition. He's done that forever. He opposes, insane expenditures, no matter who the president is, who controls Congress, and that's been his shtick forever. He is opposing the CR, which is essentially the Biden CR, despite the fact that Trump whipped for it. They got that passed. He opposed the big, beautiful bill. Trump whipped for that, got that passed. And, you have to get on board if you're supporting Trump, despite the fact that they're spending us into debt. This is going to add $5 trillion of new debt. Massey thinks it'll add more because of how it'll affect the bond market. And Dave is right. Doge was a cornerstone of the Trump campaign. So for all these projections of, $2 trillion worth of cuts in the federal government, they didn't come to fruition, not only because of what Dave's saying, but also the fact that they introduced and proposed and celebrated and boasted about a $1 billion or a $1 trillion Pentagon budget, the first of its kind in history, totally unprecedented in this small Republican Party administration. That's what you always get with Republicans, and Massey calls them out. All he's asking is live up to your campaign promises. And what does he get for that? He is treated worse than Lindsey Graham by Trump. That's what he gets for it.
And you look at a situation where we're $37 trillion in debt. It's so goofy, Tom, because me and you have been friends and talking about these numbers since they're so astronomical now. There's $37 trillion in debt, government spending $7 trillion a year, and you have the Republicans, the president of the United States who won all the swing states and the popular vote is campaigning on this Doge thing. The Republicans control the House and the Senate, and they got the Supreme Court just in case they need that. And you still can't get government spending cuts in this environment. And it's just, it's nothing that, you haven't been talking about for decades now, but it is one more and maybe the best example of just the fact that, and you could run the counterfactual in your head, like imagine Donald Trump was good on this stuff. The leverage that he would have had to call out every single Republican. It goes, listen, if there's one thing that all of those Republican hacks in DC have in common, they've all said for their entire career that they're for small government and that the Democrats are reckless spenders, and they want a balanced budget, and they believe in, whatever they claim to believe in that we all know is nonsense.
Yeah, that's all they campaign on for my entire life. They're the party of small government, but once they get entrenched in power, coated in it, cloaked in it, however you want to say it, once they control Congress and the presidency, they spend more than the Democrats. And then, not to be one up, the next time the Democrats are elected, they outspend their predecessor. Obama outspent Bush in totality. This happens on and on and on. This is why we call it the Uniparty. Doge was a lot of empty rhetoric that never came to fruition. Elon Musk realized it, and, too late, too little too late when you rely on Republicans to cut spending. And this is so reminiscent to me of what happened in 2017 when Trump first got into the presidency in his first term. All we heard during that campaign trail was how abominable Obamacare was, how expensive it was for people to purchase premiums, how, some people couldn't keep their doctors because of healthcare rationing, things like that. People were unable to afford healthcare after Obamacare was implemented, especially because of the individual mandate. Well, what did the Republicans do once they got in office? Did they repeal Obamacare? No, actually, they stopped trying to repeal Obamacare. They wanted to modify it to suit their own purposes of government involvement in the healthcare system. This was after sending, I think, 6 or 7 bills to Obama's desk that would have directly repealed Obamacare, all of which, were dead letters. Obama was going to veto every single one of them, and he did. But once they got in power, they didn't try that anymore. Why? Because they're the same thing. And Dave speaks to that on spending. It's the same playbook, the same ball game. Only people like Rand Paul and Thomas Massie and a few others call it out when the Republicans are in power. And Dave's right. Trump has immense popularity among his base. Imagine if he directed that in good avenues when it came to spending. How powerful that would be, and how senseless it would be for Trump's opponents to counteract that. Trump has a lot of influence. He is a cult of personality bigger than any Republican in my lifetime outside of Reagan, and maybe more than Reagan.
But he could have called all of them on that.
Yeah.
And he could have written the bill himself and said, that's it. We're cutting $1 trillion out of the budget next year. It's a huge missed opportunity. And thank God we have some people like Thomas Massie who will call him out for that.
Right on. Massie's a hero as far as I'm concerned. And, I like his veneer, his attitude, his don't give an F type persona when it comes to this stuff. He's been through it all when it comes to opposing the Republicans on their insanity, not only in spending, but also on AIPAC's influence, the Israel lobby, the wars, all the money drummed up by Mike Johnson and Republicans to send from the pocketbooks of Americans over to Zelensky for this fruitless proxy war. He's bashed all of it, and he stood by the president during Russiagate and all the attempts to bring him down by the deep state, but still Trump rewards those that were on the wrong side of that issue more than Massie, who, according to Trump, needs to be primaried. Why does he need to be primaried? He has the gall to say you should keep your campaign promises when it comes to spending and foreign policy.
He deserves it.
The implication that Massie is anything other than brave is crazy to me. It must be intensely difficult to be him. I mean, for one thing, within the past year or two, he lost his wife. His wife died completely unexpectedly. So his helpmate in life is now gone to be a source of support for him. And yet without her, he's nevertheless taking positions that sometimes involve siding with Trump when no one else will, on certain things. But or taking positions like what, remember when there was that measure up to put a kill switch in every new car, and the Democrats were just getting up there and saying this will help against drunk drivers, and Massie is listing all the problems with this ridiculous thing, and all they could do was just repeat, well, it'll help. It's like they weren't even listening to him. Where were the other Republicans? None of them gave a damn, as usual, about things like that. Like Massie is just heroic in case after case after case, but now he's gotten himself in a position where Trump is denouncing him. People who barely know how to spell his name are condemning him without even looking at his record, which would make all of them, put all of them to shame. And meanwhile, it's not like this gets him a lot of friends on the left, because you know how the left is these days. You're less than pond scum if you're not on the left. So he gets nothing there. He's isolated, and he's got a very difficult position. Not one of these critics of him could stand in his shoes for 10 minutes, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is totally right. Massey is heroic, and even if you disagree with him, he does stand up to the establishment wing of his party when he feels it's right. And he's not unlike people on the left, like Dennis Kucinich in that way did that. And I'll give him praise for that too. Obviously don't agree with him on everything. I agree with Massey on much more. But the kill switch issue, that was a serious issue that would have sweeping ramifications on privacy rights and the ability for the central government to centrally plan your communications. Basically, and transportation, basically shut you down if you have the wrong opinion. You'd be treated like a Canadian trucker easily, but more powerful by the state, and, you know, just shutting dissidents down arbitrarily if they wish. And Massey stood against that. Republicans don't prioritize it. Massey has a keen awareness of getting in front of something before it becomes precedent, before it becomes sweeping, and attempts to stop stuff like endless wars and the Patriot Act and the CARES Act and TARP, all these disasters that Republicans have gotten behind because, you know, it was politically feasible at the time to get behind it because the president supported it or the party leadership. That's what Massey stands up for, and he deserves medals as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's like, it's the easiest thing in the world is just to like be loyal to the president who's in your political party. That's what all of them pretend to be. You know, it's like that's and you know there is I'll say understandably there is amongst Trump supporters, and I've experienced a little bit of this myself over the last couple of weeks. But amongst Trump supporters, there is this feeling of like, anybody who's not loyal to Donald Trump, anybody who's criticizing Donald Trump is an enemy now. And I understand to some degree where, you know, when you had like Donald Trump's own government, the history of working against him while he was president of the United States of America, you know, being major ways, being framed for treason by your own intelligence agencies.
And maybe 2 assassination attempts that if there wasn't direct Fed involvement, there is at least the tendency to look the other way on the first one, especially. So yeah, you got that. And I agree. I understand this defense mechanism of sorts in some ways.
I understand where they, you know, people develop a kind of a demand for loyalty, and you want to make sure that he's not being sabotaged. But at the same time, that's not what Thomas Massey's doing here. Thomas Massey had his back in all of those fights and all of those examples where the swamp was trying. Thomas Massey here is criticizing Donald Trump for continuing the swamp, which is what continuing government spending at this level is. That's the whole thing. You know, the whole swamp is the fact that you got this central government in DC that extracts $7 trillion out of the real economy every year and hands it off to their political cronies. And that's the issue, Donald. This is the core of Drain the Swamp, is cutting government spending. And, you know, Thomas Massey, we got to have some people who will stand up for principles.
Yeah, Dave's exactly right. And beyond extracting $7 trillion from the populace every year, they also inflate your wealth away through the hidden tax, inflation. It's a deliberate policy. It's not a law of nature that inflation has to happen. It's a product of the central banks devaluing the currency by printing more of it and, you know, manipulating the interest rates. That's what we have on top of the extortion apparatus, which is taxation, capital gains tax, property tax, income tax, sales tax, death tax, inheritance tax, all sorts of taxes that Americans deal with, you know, seizing 40 to 50% of a lot of people's wealth that live in this country. And Massey stands against that. And for, you know, standing against that and for being loyal toward Trump during the Russiagate hoax and all the January 6th insurrection narrative nonsense, he gets treated worse than Lindsey Graham, who Trump endorses. This is despite the fact that Lindsey Graham has supported all of the all of the absurd spending and all of the extravagancy that characterizes the swamp. If there was a swamp creature, they'd have a head that was Lindsey Graham's head. And Lindsey Graham, the preeminent neocon, gets treated better than Massey in Trump's eyes because Massey doesn't toe the party line on spending. And that's why he deserves our praise. And that way he's no different than Cato, who watched the Roman Republic crumble around him because, an ambitious ruler, Caesar, decided to, enact tyrannical schemes. And that's what we're seeing in Washington, and it's not a singular name. There's lots of tyrants in Washington. They're of various political stripes. Some of them aren't even elected. Some of them are the deep state that influences our policy, clearly so in terms of foreign policy and the CIA. We've seen that, just up close and recent with the latest war versus Iran. But what do you think about Thomas Massie? Do you think Dave Smith is right? Do you think Trump is wrong on Massie? Let me know down below. Who do you think are the other heroes that exist in Washington, D.C., if not Massie? If there's someone else that you think deserves a call out, I'd like to hear that. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to Tom Woods. He is awesome. He's a friend of mine. Please subscribe to his channel. And please consider becoming a YouTube member by clicking join down below and support my channel. If you do that, you do get advanced access to all of my videos before they come out. And I really appreciate the support. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.